I don't care about the next James Bond. He kills for country, Queen and God. We don't need another murderous toff. And that is how Idols sing one of the verses in the song I'm Scum. Today I'm going to be talking about James Bond movies on episode 127 of Mark Talks About His Things. I'm going to talk about the James Bond formula, and I'm going to talk about my favourite James Bond film. In fact, I was originally planning on doing a ranking of all of the James Bond films, but then I realised there are 25 James Bond films. We're going to be some time. So I think I might talk about the James Bond films chronologically at some point when I've run out of records to talk about, which might be about 4 years from now. Who knows? Today is the 11th of August 2021, which means that 20 years ago today I was watching U2 on the Elevation Tour at the Manchester 9X or Evening News or GMX or whatever it was called that week, I don't know. And that means that 25 years ago today, Oasis were playing at Nebworth. I wasn't there, but pretty much everyone I knew apart from me was. And at some point I think I might talk about Britpop, but right now I'm going to talk about Brit Bond and James Bond and the murderous, psychopathic, insane toff that he is. Unlike pretty much every other action movie hero, James Bond has no actual verified proven superhero powers. His power as such, much like the bad guys, is that he has access to an awful lot of money and he's completely fucking batshit insane. Now, before you think, oh, that's a bit harsh on James Bond, well, let's just go through, I think, just some of the things that happen in the 23 official James Bond movies, or maybe it's 24, plus the 2 unofficial James Bond movies, which are respectively Casino Royale, oh no, that's Never Say Never Again, and Casino Royale. Basically, a guy in a suit who drinks nothing but martini shaken, not stirred, and then later on, thanks to product placement, Heineken, travels the world killing people. He, in the course of the movies, he's killed 370 people, 47 in GoldenEye, and only 1 in The Man with the Golden Gun. He's also slept with 52 women, although I think the word sleep may be overstating the degree of relaxation that he's exercised in the films. And he's saved the world countless times, including all the times that we've never ever heard about that are mentioned vaguely. And oh, do you remember that time in, Santa Verde or something, when you accidentally bumped into a guy called John Matrix who looked an awful lot like Arnold Schwarzenegger? Why, yes, I do. James Bond is, if you take James Bond films seriously, there's something wrong with you. And I think there's something wrong with the people that have been making James Bond films for the past 15 years or so, because they've taken James Bond seriously. James Bond shouldn't be taken seriously at all. These films are formulaic, they are stupid in a very smart way, and they are very, very ridiculous and expensive. Sometimes it feels like when I pay for a ticket to see a James Bond film, I'm not paying for a ticket, I'm just footing my portion of the worldwide bill for the destruction and carnage that he has wreaked over the next 2.5 hours on the screen. And the films are always overlong now. The plots are far too convoluted. And really, what I want to do when I watch a James Bond film, I want to see explosions, and I want to have a good time. That's it. I'm quite happy if it resets itself at the beginning of every one of the films. But James Bond has remained a fully grown adult from 1962 through to 2021. Now, maths is not necessarily my forte, but that means that he has been a fully grown Spy McSpyface for 59 years on the screen, and yet he has barely aged. He may have changed actors, but nothing else has changed. Personally, I think that James Bond might actually be a time-travelling immortal from Highlander. I mean, there is a reason why Sean Connery was a Scottishman playing an Egyptian in Highlander, because for all we know, Highlander could actually be one of the forms of James Bond, and he's just grown old over time, and turned into the time traveling guy who can only be killed by being beheaded. Because, by the way, you've never seen in any of the James Bond films, no one's ever tried to detach his head with a sword successfully, and he's managed to walk away from every car crash, every explosion, every apocalypse level event, every punch up in space, and every bizarre guy with a weird evil beard who's tried to kill him. Walked away from it completely scot-free, apart from that one time in that one film, which nobody ever talks about. Basically, James Bond is immortal. He's probably the Highlander in a suit and a shave. And I get really, really concerned about this film. Maybe MI6 know that he's a time-travelling Highlander, and they've just gone, we'll keep it quiet, just save the world when we need you. Which is, a way of looking at it. So there are, I think, is it 6 James Bonds now? There are 23, 24 official films, 2 spin-off movies, an awful lot of books, more Blu-ray box sets that you can shake an extremely big Walther PPK shaped stick at, and they're all crazy. Let's start with the formula for James Bond, because the formula is crystal clear, and this is why I think that Moonraker is the best James Bond movie. Okay, so I'm going to have, normally I have a table here, but I've moved the table. So instead I've got a pile of soundtrack CDs, which I'm going to use as replacements for the actual movies. So the formula is, it starts off with 7 minutes of explosions and possibly some innuendo. So, these movies, starting with Dr. No, are there explosions? Well, sort of. There is an opening sequence, the credits come before the first actual sequence, and there's an opening sequence with an assassination. So in Dr. No, lo and behold, to the tune of, I think, 3 blind mice, someone is murdered. Then we have, and then they've refined the James Bond formula. So actually, Dr. No is missing a huge chunk of these formulas, but it was the first movie. By the time we get to Goldfinger, pretty much all of these things are locked in, and the series never deviates from them until we get to the point of Casino Royale. And then when we get to Casino Royale, the series goes well off the rails indeed. Trust James Bond to be the guy who's got the worst James Bond to be in the best James Bond movie, and one of the best James Bonds to be in all the worst James Bond movies. By the way, I think the Daniel Craig movies are no good, very bad, terrible indeed. Sean Connery is a pretty good Bond. My favourite Bond will surprise you. Gasp at page 13 when you find out. So the formula is 7 minutes of explosions topped off with an innuendo. The best example that we can get for this is not on this set. The best example that we can get for that is Octopussy, which is both the most stupid title for a movie ever and one of the best movies ever made, because it is so ridiculously stupid. So Octopussy came out in 1983. And as a title sequence goes, it has just the most fantastic opening sequence where James Bond flies a ridiculously small dwarf plane and blows some things up. And then he, goes to at the end, he brings the plane down to land next to a petrol station, looks at the camera and says something along the lines of, "Fill her up," which is, just innuendo, full stop. James Bond is nothing if not a one-man quip and murder machine. So we've got that. Then we've got the title sequences. The title sequences are just basically just really nice graphic shots. Mostly in the ye olde days, it was naked women with pictures of Sean Connery being projected onto them, whilst a contemporary singer sang a song about killing, murder, women, dresses and gold, and probably spaceships, for all I know. It was a really fascinating moment in culture when you heard all the James Bond songs that could have been in around about 1997. They took the James Bond theme tunes out and they got Pulp and Garbage and a number of other bands to do songs that became B-sides of singles with names like Tomorrow Never Lies or Tomorrow Never Flies or Tomorrow Never Guys. And, you just go basically very obviously going, come on, that's a James Bond theme tune, and everyone and their dog knows it. So we've got the title sequence, which is obviously colours and noise and the names of the second assistant Grip, whoever he is. And it's always going to be a he, isn't it? And then the third sequence is the briefing. So James Bond goes into an office. He's normally in London. He flirts with a woman called Moneypenny, who will never, ever actually have any form of romantic entanglement with him. That's the joke. All women are attracted to James Bond. No, they're not. And then he meets a guy called M, or occasionally a woman, who tells him, "This is what we need you to do. He's a very, very bad man indeed. He's a bazillionaire, and he's got space lasers and razor sharks and things like that." I don't even know why I said it in that voice. And then the next point is, just basically by the fourth sequence, you've met a guy called Q. Guy obviously previously being played by Desmond Llewellyn, who there are two things that happen in every Q scene up until relatively recently. The first one is guess the gadget. So he shows you a gadget, gives it to James Bond, and you spend the rest of the movie going, when and how is he going to need some bizarre, weird, whistle-activated laser that's also magnetic and can cut your lawn? I don't know. And then the second part of it is that James Bond will always pick something up, Q will make a joke around how it shouldn't work, and in the background something explodes in a way that you never ever would conceive would happen. I call that one a ghetto blaster, as Q would say. Okay, scene 5, travel. Normally planes, sometimes cars, very rarely boats. In one movie, it's a goddamn spaceship, but there's travel to somewhere new and weird and exotic. And when he gets to somewhere new and exotic, he meets what I call the local stooge. It's an ally of some description, normally by the name of Felix Leiter, who's played by a different actor in almost every movie. Bond never goes, Felix, you've changed. And Felix will go, Bond, you've changed. You used to be Roger Moore. Nobody ever asks any questions around that. Even though Q stays the same all the way through 17 of the movies, he never goes, James, you've changed your hair. And James goes, I've changed my face. I've changed everything about me. I'm now a Highlander. Nobody ever goes that. Sorry about the accent. I know it is terrible, awful, and so on and so forth. But it is Sean Connery, who was incredibly easy to take the piss out of, even when he was alive. So you've got the local ally, who's normally some well-connected person operating a bit of a side hustle, as the young guns of today now call it. And then you've got another section where he meets woman number one. There are normally 3 women in James Bond films. This formula kind of sticks in, not with From Russia with Love, but with Goldfinger, which is largely regarded as the best James Bond film, probably because it's the first one that had all of these particular bits falling into place. Woman number one in Goldfinger, unsurprisingly, dies. She is friendly. She is very friendly to James Bond, although I don't quite know why, because he doesn't seem to be the most charming or lovable or loving of guys, but somehow she sleeps with him, and then she ends up dead, painted gold. There's normally a woman number one who has a lifespan of about 6 minutes in any James Bond movie before she dies. Goldfinger is where this first occurred. There's normally a chase, by the way, at this point. I don't quite know why. As you can see, Thunderball there has a chase in it. I can't believe anybody actually took some of these movies seriously. I didn't, even when I first watched James Bond films, and I think the first James Bond film I saw I was probably 7, and I think it might have been Moonraker on ITV. I can remember where all the advert breaks were. I knew it was stupid at the age of 7, and yet somehow some people still take this stuff seriously. I can't get to that. You've got chase number 1. Normally chase number 1, where somebody tries to kill James Bond and they fail, and they try to do it in some incredibly stupid and protracted way that stands absolutely no chance whatsoever of success, like getting James Bond to stand somewhere whilst a gigantic safe falls on him, or perhaps to stand right next to a lightning rod in the middle of a thunderstorm, because that's always going to work. Of course it doesn't. Okay, after the first failed attempt to kill Bond and chase number 1, although chase number 1 is normally in the pre-credit sequence, there's at least a chase by about 40 minutes in. I don't quite know what the chase is. Sometimes maybe it's just a big game of tag. I have no idea. They meet the villain, and the villain has 2 characteristics. The first one is, like Batman, and Bond, his superpower is having access to money and being totally fucking batshit. That's the villain's main character trait. The second one is they normally have some kind of physical affliction. They have a scar, or they're bald, or they have a beard, or they cry tears, or they can shoot lightning bolts out of their eyes, or they're just really big, or really thin, or really tall. There's something about them that shows that they've got a physical impediment that has to be overcome by being completely psychopathic and absolutely loaded. James Bond bad guys are never poor. And like a lot of people that are very, very rich, they're not satisfied with having lots and lots and lots of money. They want lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of money and power, probably women, world domination, and the ability to turn all of the milk in everybody's fridges into sour milk that's days old simply by clicking a button on their big screen of things. As far as I'm concerned, if you wanted to do a world domination approach, and you're a James Bond bad guy, if you were able to flick a switch that made every fridge in the world turn all the milk off instantly like that, that would probably destabilize the world's economy more than stealing a nuclear submarine, gassing everybody with a poisonous plant from Brazil, or perhaps getting an ATAC, whatever an ATAC is. So that's your James Bond bad guy. They have a ridiculous plot, they have far too much money, and they normally have a physical impediment. Also at this point, you generally tend to meet the Stooge. Now the Stooge is a bad guy who's a bit of muscle with a quirk. Now in From Russia with Love, the Stooge's only ability was to be able to turn into the grizzled old sailor man from Jaws 12 years before its time. In Goldfinger, obviously, it was Odd Job. I think it was Odd Job, with a murderous hat. In The Man with the Golden Gun, it was a dwarf. And in, I think, Live and Let Die, it was a man with a hook for a hand. I'm going to call him Hook Hand, although I don't actually know his name. In The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, it's a 7-foot-tall man with steel teeth. I don't know him socially, but he kills people. You know, it's that type of thing. Basically, your bad guys are weird, and that's why they become bad guys, because they're practically unemployable. You couldn't see Jaws, for example, working in customer service at QuickFit. You can't see Odd Job, for example, being particularly good in a call centre. So these guys are practically unemployable. And there's a second kind of stooge in Moonraker that kind of looks like a bootleg Bruce Lee, who turns up occasionally and tries to kill Bond using an elaborate plot, and again gets killed halfway through. So at this point, we've set up the plot. We've got a villain, we've got a girl. The girl might be evil, she might not be. Bond's definitely slept with her. That's how it works. We've got a stooge. He's got a quirk and a physical impediment, but it's not quite as weird as the actual bad guy's physical impediment. You know, for example, in A View to a Kill, the guy's physical impediment happens to be that he's a Nazi genetic clone type guy, played by Christopher Walken, because David Bowie turned the role down. And you know, those bad guys with the quirks, they have some weird and unusual things. One of them can't feel any pain. One of them has weird teeth. One of them has a killer hat. They always tend to die in an ironic fashion, hoist on their own petard, crushed by their own satellite communication system, etc., etc. Then there's Girl 2 that turns up. Normally works for the bad guy, sometimes has a heart of gold, sometimes has a heart of stone, but Bond will sleep with her anyway before he finds out her true colours, although it won't ever be quite as blunt as in Who Dares Wins, where Lewis Collins kills the woman because she's one of the bad guys and he had an opportunity to do it. James Bond will only murder her in self-defence and never in cold blood, because that's the kind of chivalrous, loaded, psychopathic tough that we need. The next thing that happens is at some point there's going to be a double entendre. Someone's going to die in a bathtub killed by a toaster, and James Bond is going to go, shocking, or keeping the British end up, sir. And this is terrible life lessons to have, actually, because I thought until about half an hour ago that I thought you should always be ready with ready wit and a double entendre. So whenever anything happens, you should be able to say, let off some steam, or he got the point, or something like that. And then what I realised is life is not like the movies, and I am not surrounded by psychopathic space Nazis that are trying to gas the whole planet to set up their own Aquarian utopia. It's all very, very strange. The James Bond movies gave me a distorted view of reality when I was growing up, because I thought that James Bond was crazy, and what I actually now realise is some people took this stuff seriously. So then we've got the double entendre. Then, of course, we've got the plot. Let's say You Only Live Twice. Yes, that has spaceships, but they can't afford to go to space too often in You Only Live Twice. So the plot only goes as far as not quite getting in the spaceship. Or on Her Majesty's Secret Service, the plot again is demented. Do you remember when you met me and you hated chickens? I have taught you to love chickens. I don't even know what the plot of On Her Majesty's Secret Service is. What I do know is that the bad guy is played by a different fella. The James Bond is played by a different fella. This never happened to the other fella. And somehow none of them go, but you're not Telly Savalas, you're Charles Gray. What's happened to you? And they go, but in the next movie I'm played by Donald Pleasance. I'm like, really? What? No, that's not right. Anyway, you change the bad guys every movie, even if he has the same name. So, by the way, there are probably more actors that have played Blofeld now than there are actual James Bond movies. And then you've got the bad guy. Their plot is both immensely complicated, utterly preposterous, and incapable of actually happening, such as, for example, the Goldfinger plot, stealing all the gold from Fort Knox, the Thunderball plot, whatever that was, stealing a nuclear bomb from a Vulcan bomber, um, Diamonds Are Forever. That's had something about lasers, didn't it? And diamonds and spaceships and blowing things up. Live and Let Die with Voodoo. Man with the Golden Gun, which was James Bond versus an equally demented bad guy who killed people for money. I'm sure there was some kind of deliberate thing. There was a subplot about a Solex agitator, whatever that is. I don't even know. And then there's a weird spy murder. So by that, what I mean is that they try to kill James Bond in a preposterous mechanism, hanging him upside down from an astro droid or something, leaving him out in the sun just a little bit too long with a mirror pointed at him that's going to set him on fire, trying to kill him in a zero-grav machine, which of course is the chosen method of murder in the truly phenomenal Moonraker, which is my favourite James Bond film because it is the best one, guys. It's like Moonraker is like a James Bond film, but it's 14% too weird to be real, and therefore that goes from being laughably bad to being the most straight-laced parody ever. By the way, Moonraker is my favourite James Bond film. So you've got the weird spy murder that fails, the elaborate plot. You get some attempt to shoot him or kill him or to get him to eat poisoned pheasant or something. I don't know. And then there's two other things that happen before the film comes to an end. There's an exotic showdown. So you've got a showdown in some weird and unusual place that nobody has ever been. I mean, basically James Bond movies are like some kind of murderous tourism. And you go to the point where you go, right, well, where are we going to go? We're going to go to Rio. I mean, obviously Rio is glamorous if you've not been to Rio. Nobody ever ends up with their evil plan taking place on an industrial estate off Junction 10 at Walsall, and nobody ever should, because Walsall by itself is inherently evil and is in fact a hellmouth anyway. But if you're going to go and commit these huge and preposterous plans to take over the world, do it somewhere nobody would ever think about it. Go for the Godiva Industrial Park just off Coventry. Hire a big unit there. All anyone will never need to know is that you import and export things, and that's the reason why you've got a huge space laser, or you've got some kind of preposterous astronaut robot genetic cloning diamond machine there. I don't know exactly what it does. Or you can mind control octopuses and crabs, small insects, that, and nobody ever goes through that. And that should probably be the plot that you've got, a plot that's so preposterous even James Bond will go, you've got to be joking, Q. And the answer is, I never joke about my work, 007. Now, there's also Girl 3. So we've had Girl 2. Girl 2 is probably evil. Bond has almost definitely slept with her, and then she died. She may have had a last-minute change of heart and turned into Girl 3. Girl 3 is the woman with the heart of gold that Bond ends up with at the end of the movie, apart from on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which I probably should take more seriously than I actually do. And of course, the last scene is Bond in bed with a woman, doing manly things with a woman as well. Of course, if you read the James Bond novels, I only have one James Bond novel, and I know this novel is not based necessarily on the Ian Fleming books. This is Christopher Wood's The Spy Who Loved Me. This is the novelisation of the book of the film as opposed to the film of the book. And I'm just going to read to you the last paragraph of this. I'm going to put on my sexiest voice now, which is Bond's hard, naked body moved towards the bed, and his fingers closed around the sheet. James, you are not the first man that has made love to me. She looked into his eyes half apologetically. My darling, he said, that remains to be seen. And he came down on her like a hawk. That's all action fiction from Panther Books there. Utter fucking nonsense. So, there you go. And that is the James Bond formula, condensed down into 24 minutes of ranting. Any one of the James Bond films, Live or Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me is a particularly good example of this. His latter space remake, Moonraker is the best James Bond film of all time. For Your Eyes Only attempts to go weird and serious because it doesn't use sports cars. It uses the good old-fashioned Citroen 2CV there. It tries to present itself as a gritty, kind of new urban Bond. And if you take Bond seriously, frankly, please don't. It's ridiculous. You've then got Octopussy, as daft as its title, and you've got A View to a Kill. I have a really soft spot for this film. This film is so bad, it goes all the way around to good and then to bad again. And then again, you've got another one of these gritty modern movies, The Living Daylights, which again has a man in a suit killing people, being a psychopathic mass murderer whose only superpower is being incredibly rich and having access to guns and things like that. And then we get to the true nadir of the Bond movies, the Daniel Craig eras. He's a really good Bond, by the way, Daniel Craig, but his movies are not any good. There are also the films, which I'm going to kind of mention through here. So far, I think I have is there one I haven't talked about? Yes, I think there is, but it's one of the more recent ones. I have not mentioned the worst James Bond films for a reason, because I think at some point I should go through the Bond films in a reverse order and tell you which ones I like and which ones I don't, and why I do and don't like them. So the James Bond formula is deceptively easy. You can see even from these is that you know exactly what you're dealing with. A man in a suit, a psychopath who's a bad guy who wants to take over the world with a weird quirk, some crazy women doing some crazy things, and some serious moments where he does some serious shooting. Whoa, 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 nice shooting text. And then miraculously, he turns into Pierce Brosnan, and there's Sean Bean. And by the way, talking of Sean Bean, I know he says bastard, and he dies in most of his movies, but I do have to pick up something I feel very, very strongly about with Sean Bean, which is he either should be called Sean Bourne or Sean Bean. You can't go Sean Bean, because then you might as well go Sean Bourne. And it's like, what? Sean Bean? Sean Bourne? Sean Bourne? Sean Bean? Just make up your mind, but don't go around changing it. It's like, whichever person put that extra N and the E in Wednesday. I mean, come on, guys, what are you talking about? Anyway, here's Pierce Brosnan, looking young, shooting people, doing bad guy things. And unsurprisingly, there is one of the bad guys with a physical disfigurement. If I recall correctly, this guy has diamonds in his face, and there is no version of reality in which that can actually happen. I do remember after seeing the truly, truly awful Die Another Day, I remember saying to my then girlfriend Charlotte, I said, I'm really, really sorry about how bad this film is. I owe you 3 chick flicks. And she got 3 chick flicks out of me for it. Die Another Day is awful. And at some point I will talk about that. We've got Casino Royale, where all of a sudden, even though James Bond has changed, Q has changed, although I'm not sure Q appears in this one. M has changed, although M stayed the same. Everyone's dead from the original movie, apart from Sean Connery, who's retired. Somehow, Casino Royale is seen as a gritty reboot. Largely, it should be called the Bond Ultimatum. And for some reason, we're now taking these films seriously, as opposed to seeing them as a kind of ridiculously preposterous hard reset guff that it actually was. All the Bond films, up to Casino Royale, were largely self-contained bits of absolute nonsense and hokum, where at the end of it, the world was saved, the girl was slept with, the bad guy was killed, all the bad guys miraculously disappeared into day jobs, even though the main bad guy, who was unemployable and certainly couldn't work in a call centre, had been hoisted on his own petard stroke communication satellite stroke weird and unusual tiger, panther or snake, had died. And then you end up with this, where they take this stuff seriously, they start to build a mythology into James Bond, and you end up with the truly, truly awful Spectre, which is not in this box set, but is in fact on my shelf downstairs. And Spectre is the worst James Bond film of all time, because you realise that the bad guy has got daddy stroke brother issues, and somehow is James Bond's adopted half brother golfing partner, something bullshit. Anyway, doesn't matter. Spectre, dog shit. Skyfall, almost dog shit. Quantum of Solace, quite good. Casino Royale takes itself far too seriously. They're good films, but we don't want serious, grim, dark, meaningful, chin-stroking, oh, I'm incredibly rich and I kill people and that makes me feel sad stuff with James Bond. You want a murderous psychopath who's completely remorseless in a suit, but yet somehow has a moral code and a heart of gold. that will only kill who he absolutely has to. And my God, what a lot of killing he does. 370 murders throughout the course of the films, which basically makes him some kind of besooted Hannibal Lecter. He's got the same line in terrible, terrible quips. He thinks he's a wine snob, but he isn't, and yada yada yada. Basically, James Bond is Hannibal Lecter if MI5 got to him before he turned into a killer and said, "You can do it, and as long as you wave a flag at the end, it'll all be okay." Well, I need you, James. So does England. As indeed is the last words, I think, of the pre-credit sequence for The Spy Who Loved Me, which is widely regarded as one of the best James Bond films. It is one of the best James Bond films, but you shouldn't take them seriously. Okay, that's a rundown of the formula of the James Bond films. At some point, I'm going to rank them. I'm going to talk about them, and bearing in mind the formula, which I've just told you about, we're going to go and see how does each one of these films match up to that formula. And the answer is not particularly well sometimes. It is inevitable anytime anyone talks about James Bond that they have to use the phrase "it was a product of its time," and the time of the James Bond films is important, because then social attitudes were different and certain behaviours were probably seen as okay, stroke, or even cool. And let's not muck about. In the early movies, James Bond is probably racist, he's most definitely sexist, and he is completely and utterly a murdering psychopath who looks good in a suit. So that makes it all forgiven, because he does it for Queen and country. Now, with that in mind, half an hour on the James Bond formula is probably more than enough for now. Next time I talk about James Bond, I am going to rank the films. For the purposes of ranking the films, Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again are canon. And certainly these films are not as bad as some of the other ones. But we'll get to that when we get there. So, in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. I will see you all again sometime soon. I'm now going to stop talking, have a breath. Oh, I'm tired after that. Anyone would have think that I've been trying to cut down on my caffeine. Really, I have my caffeine shaker, not stirred. And that should all be the end of that. So thank you, and I will see you all again soon. Adios, amigos, as Ramon said on their last live album. Be lovely in the comments. I will see you soon. Bye.